Restaurant Unstoppable, episode 728 with Mike Rypka. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, Mike Rypka. My man, Mike, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I'm feeling very unstoppable, sir.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Oh, man, I cannot wait to be here. You've been on my list for a while, and we got it. We locked you down, man. I know this is going to be a good one. So hailing from Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., Mike Rypka got his start in the restaurant industry as a fry cook at Popeyes. He found his passion for cooking during his time working at a country club in Springfield, Virginia. From there, he attended Johnson & Wales University in North Miami, Florida. This experience earned him a place with the Marriott, which took him to California and eventually Texas, where he worked in corporate settings until he left the corporate scene for Chuy's in the mid-2000s. 2 years later, at the age of 32, it was time for Rypka to do his own thing, and in 2006, Torchy's was born. 14 years later, Mike serves Torchy's as founder and chairman, and the brand has scaled to 17 locations in the Austin Metroplex area and over 75 locations in all. Man, I cannot wait to get into your story, but let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
I'd say the one that I think of the most, and we use in our company a lot, is the devil's in the details.
Ooh, the devil's in the details, and I love what you did there with the being on brand.
Yeah, a little bit.
Dive into that.
So basically, restaurants for me, it's about the experience for the guest. And with that comes a lot of details. There's just a ton that goes on behind the scenes that people don't even think about or... nor should they. I mean, they're coming in to eat a damn good taco. They want a good experience. They want to have a great drink at the bar. They want to leave happy, whether they're with friends or with family. And so a lot of those details, just, everything from how you open the doors in the morning, making sure you got your staff there, you got the right staff in the right places. Do you have the right product coming in the door? Did it get in the door? Is all your prep list done? Is the tomatoes you received from the produce guy, are they great tomatoes? Do you have ripe mangoes for the tacos? Are your meats marinated long enough?
Lots of details.
Is your kitchen clean? And then there's the whole... piece around, you can't be in business and lose money. So how do you make that profitable? A lot of that's due to scheduling, how much, what's your portioning like, just all of the above.
I'm sure we'll dive into a lot of that, but one thing I want to pull back the layer on, something that comes up a lot on the show is people have one of their biggest challenges is trusting their people that they surround themselves to deliver on the level of detail that they would if they were doing it themselves, right?
Yeah.
What's one thing that you do now that you've scaled to over 75 locations? What things are you doing to make sure that level of detail is echoing throughout every person that's on your team?
So we've worked hard as a group, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, to really, think through and develop kind of our core values. And so we use the acronym TORCH, which stands for tenacity, originality, respect, community, and honor. And we preach those a lot. We talk about them a lot. A lot of our team members talk with their team members about it. And what that does is that sort of just reins in the culture around, how we think about things, why we do the things we do. It's been hugely important. Those values have come to life big time during this whole Corona pandemic. A lot of tenacity, a lot of originality, a lot of respect, and, those things. And so it's just been... That's been the main thing that I think has really helped, especially as we've, gotten bigger and have scaled and we've got stores in different states.
And I love how you made it sticky by making it an acronym. That's so close to your brand, right?
Yeah.
So powerful tool there. Maybe this will come up later as our conversation unfolds, but I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's bring it back to when you knew that this was going to be your path and you started living intentionally to climb that ladder.
In terms of what,
So I know a little bit about your story. I know that you started in Popeyes, but you didn't really know this was going to be your path until you met a mentor at a country club, correct?
Yeah. So I was lived with a single mom. It was me and her mostly. And, if I wanted money to go do fun stuff, I had to go earn it on my own. So I got a job at Popeyes. And I enjoyed it. It was a good way to make money. It wasn't too hard. It was a lot of work, but I didn't mind working. And I've always kind of had those values just kind of my whole life. And my parents worked really hard, so I got taught that early on. And I guess by the time I got to that country club, which was probably my third job in high school, after Popeyes, I was a busboy and a line cook at a place called Le Peep, which was kind of a breakfast concept. And when I was at the country club, that's where I kind of found sort of like, oh, this is what food can be like, right?
Yep.
Like, we were doing lots of big buffets and fancier dishes and, working with filet mignon and, back then, like, everybody was carving fruit and doing these big aspic trays and all this stuff. So it was very artistic. And I just really enjoyed it. And, the funny thing is I struggled when I got there. The chef, his name was Brian.
Okay.
He was a bit of a mentor to me early on. And, he almost fired me after a couple weeks being there.
Paint that picture. What were you struggling with?
Well, my knife skills weren't great. It took me twice as long as everybody else to get prep done and things like that. And I hadn't had the chops yet. And so I went and got another job sort of part-time, and I was getting ready to turn in my notice because I could just feel it breathing down his neck every time he'd walk in and sort of shake his head at me. And something about that other job just sort of sped me up a little bit. And it was at the Southwest place.
So it was another job within the food and beverage industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was hard. It was a late night kind of Tex-Mex place in Old Town, Virginia. I don't even remember the name of it now, but I only worked there for a couple weeks.
Okay.
But your shift didn't get over till 3, 4 in the morning. And that was pretty hard. Yeah. And so anyway, so my skills, for whatever reason, they finally caught on. Okay. And I was getting a lot faster, a lot more accurate, and just, And so he said, hey, man, I want to give you a second chance and take you under my wing and teach you. You got a lot of potential. You just, got to put your head down and really get after it.
Did you ever say what it was that he saw in you, what the potential was?
He liked my attitude. I was, he could see that I cared because I'd get frustrated with myself that I couldn't quite do what I was trying to do.
But you wanted to do it.
But I wanted to do good. Yeah. And so I think that, and it reminded him of another gentleman who he sort of took under his wing, who at that point started kind of struggling a little bit. And he had worked himself up to a sous chef. And so he kind of saw me as somebody that, hey, he could start to develop and work with.
And the reason why I'm pulling back the layers here, I love to say it, is every master was once a disaster. And you have to remember that because you go, you work, you start sharpening your own skills, and then you surround yourself with other people who are good at what they do. And every once in a while, as a leader, you're going to have to bring somebody on who's green, you got to try to put yourself in their perspective and realize that they just don't know yet. Yeah. But you got to look for the things like you had, which is, do they have a desire to want to be better? Mm-hmm. If they have that desire to want to be better, you can do anything with them. And he knew that. And that's something that I think we all have to be mindful of. And I want to is it Brian?
Yeah.
I want to give him a nod because I think it's so important that if we see something in somebody, it's our duty to let them know that they have something because we don't know otherwise. Do you want to reflect on that?
Yeah, I think, he taught me a couple things. One, once I sort of kind of proven myself and my chops got better, like he was more willing to like show me some more stuff. And he saw that, I'd show up to work on time. I'd stay late if I needed to stay late. I'd work extra shifts. I just kind of did whatever it took to get things done. And so it was, the other thing he taught me that, hey, if you're going to do this career, at least for the first 5-10 years, don't work anywhere, don't stay anywhere longer than 2 years. Now, that's not maybe your typical advice that you'd give somebody.
It's great advice, though.
But and the reason he said that, and I learned that after the fact, was that, there's so much to be learned, especially in the culinary industry, to like go out and, hone your skills. And there's so many different types of cuisines, different ways people do things. And so I took that to heart. And the other thing he taught me was always hire people better than you.
Yes. Why is that so important?
And well, I think what it allows for is, first off, it takes your ego out, right? Like, and that for a lot of people, especially chefs, that cannot be an easy thing for them. But he saw that. And I learned that pretty early on, is that, like, look, I may be great at some things, but there's some things I'm just not that great at. Yeah. And why struggle? Find someone who's great at it, provide them an opportunity, and let them grow into that role. And they make you successful, and they also get to succeed themselves.
Yes, I love it. And they say that at the peak of emotional intelligence is self-awareness and being willing to admit where you're strong and where you're weak. And that's not easy to do. It's a big pill to swallow, but it's so powerful once you know when and where to get out of the way and surround yourself with people who are better than you.
Exactly.
So that's a great lesson to learn early on. The other thing I love, this idea of a minimum of, or no more than 2 years, right? But I'm going to compound on that and say, do at least 1 year, unless you're doing a stage or unless it's an agreement, because it's easy to burn bridges in this industry too. Yeah. And you don't want to just like let somebody train you how to do something and 6 months later be like, thanks for the skills, on to the next. That's not a great way.
Yeah.
Would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah. His point on the 2 years was mainly because, well, one, you sort of get to develop into a role, and then you take that next year and you kind of perfect it.
Yeah.
And it also allows you to expand your horizons within that role and catch some other things.
Yeah, be intentional, right?
Yeah, and so a year's really pretty quick.
Yeah.
And to your point, like, you don't want to just bounce all over the place, and you want to have good job history, so you can't do it. And you want to respect the people you work for.
That's what the stage is for, right?
Yeah, and his point was not so much that you like change companies every 2 years, but that you stay in a role for 2 years.
Smart.
So you could work in the same company, but always be looking for the next thing, trying to move up, doing a different role. Maybe you're a chef today, maybe tomorrow you're a food and beverage manager.
Yeah. So I know that eventually you went to school for a little bit to focus on counseling, right?
Yeah.
So you weren't quite sold on this as a career at this point in your life. Why not?
Well, restaurants are a hard business. Lot of nights, a lot of weekends. I spent a lot of my high school and then college years missing out on lots of parties, lots of road trips across the country, lots of beach trips. And so it was not, I knew I was giving something up there. And I was like, God, man, I don't know if I can commit to a life of all these nights and weekends,
I think you're
indefinitely.
You're smart to have that conversation with yourself, because it is a huge sacrifice. You got to really be willing to give that up.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, I like to help people. Maybe I could go into counseling and, help young people. I had some struggles early on as a teenager and stuff, and, maybe I could do some good there. And so I started into that, and maybe I was 2 months into school, maybe a month and a half, and I had gone to some of the, what do they call those, when the colleges come and make a pitch at your high school.
Oh, like college fair day or something?
Yeah,
like that?
Something like that. And so, and I had gotten some culinary school pamphlets, but they were kind of buried in my closet. Yeah. And I literally woke up out of my sleep and I was like, dude, what the F are you doing, man? Like, you should be a chef. Like, stop it. And, and so I couldn't go to sleep. I got super excited. I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm passionate about. I love to cook.
I think the irony of that too is what you wanted to be a counselor. The reasons why you wanted to be a counselor was because you want to be able to help young people. And I don't think, maybe you weren't mindful of this then, but that's exactly what the best chefs do. It's all about mentoring and passing down that knowledge and building people up. And I think that's our duty as chefs and business owners. And that seems to be built into you.
Yeah. So that definitely later on in my career, I've been able to help a lot of people and provide a lot of opportunities. So
you still were able to be a counselor.
Yeah. And I do stuff outside of work, to still help people. So, and we do a lot in our organization as well.
That's right. So you're on this new path. I know you ended up going to Johnson & Wales, Miami. Why Miami?
So they had only been open a year, and Providence, Rhode Island just sounded way too cold.
I'm from New Hampshire, man.
Even though I was in DC, I was like, oh, that. And I purposely went up there in the winter to visit the school because I wanted to see. There was literally like sheets of ice coming off of 18-wheelers. I was dodging as I was driving up 95. And I was just like, God, it's freaking cold up here. And the other thing, I think they had North Carolina open at that point. I'm not sure. But anyway, so I also knew that, like, you know, Florida is kind of the hub of basically the hospitality industry. You've got everything you can imagine. Curious. This was 94.
Okay.
And, you know, you've got hotels, you've got cruise ships, you've got catering, Disney World, you've got high-end restaurants, low-end. I mean, you got everything and all the culture. And the winters are pretty damn nice down in Miami. Yeah. And so that's where I picked, and I knew I'd have lots of opportunities. I think I went and talked to that Chef Brian about that. Like, hey, what do you think? He's like, dude, go to Miami. There's you know, good-looking girls. You know, there's all kinds of good stuff going on down there. So, but the main thing was just all the access to the different sort of fields of hospitality, and I got to work in a lot of different areas of hospitality down there.
Nice. So what was your approach? What was your mindset when you were in college, for anybody who's listening who might be at that point in their life?
I'd say for me, you know, I think it's different for different industries, but in the food industry, you know, the degree is one thing. You definitely want to do that, but really, you know, you got to be in restaurants. You got to be working. You got to be checking stuff out. And so I did all kinds of different stuff while I was down there. I did kosher catering. I was a chef at the Shriners Club for a little while. It's the only job I ever got fired from because I screwed up the corned beef one Friday night. That
just one night. That's all it took.
Yeah,
huh?
Yeah. They fired my ass. And so I did that. You know, I worked at Fisher Island. I got to cook for the Summit of the Americas for all the presidents.
Man, that's awesome.
All over Latin America. I worked at a real fine dining place called Mark's Place down there. Did tons of events, big, huge event. This is when, like, sort of the celebrity chef thing was starting to take off. Norman Van Akeman was real hot back then. Wolfgang Puck was starting to get hot out in California. Mark Militello was who I worked for a while. He was getting hot. And so I just would, you know, anytime there was some big event like that, I would just roll my sleeves up and figure out how I could, you know, I'd chop parsley. Yeah. I didn't care.
Did you learn any lessons, like subconsciously maybe working for Mark on how to basically create a brand around yourself? Was that anything that you think you leveraged?
No, I mean, I've never necessarily, like, Torchy's is way bigger than Mike Rypka. It really is. It's not about me. I mean, obviously I founded it, so I get a lot of the accolades for that, but it's more what I learned in that experience was just, I mean, he was doing stuff back then that, you know, was probably 20 years ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And
like what?
You know, like fried calamari on pizza. And, you know, he was doing oak rotisserie duck. We were using things like salsify root. We were using all these Caribbean flavors and blending Asian flavors into it.
So zigging when everyone else is zagging.
Yeah, he was doing all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And it was just really fun. We had a big chef's table meeting every day before the shift. The menu rotated every day. There was probably 36 items on the menu that changed every day. It was a pretty intense place.
I'm loving this conversation, but I think you're still like only 20 years old at this point.
Yeah, I know, right?
So I know you spent some time with Marriott. I think it's worth absolutely staying there, but I also don't want to cut you short. Is there anything else up to this point that needs to come out?
No, I think, you know, college was a good experience. I learned a lot. Like I said, I did, you know, I worked everywhere I could work, and I graduated. I ended up getting a hospitality degree from FIU after Johnson & Wales, so I did 2 years there. And then I came back home and back to D.C. and started looking for a job. And my first job out of college was at the World Bank. worked a couple shifts at the country club for a while just to keep some food on the table. And luckily Brian took me back, and then I got there. I got hired as an assistant manager. Like starting salary was like $28,000 a year. Okay. Wasn't much.
That's great in the mid 90s.
Yeah, right? It wasn't too bad. And then about a month and a half after I was there, the chef got promoted to a GM at another place, and they asked me to say, "Hey, Mike, you want to be the chef?"
How long were you there for?
I was there for about a year.
Okay.
A little over a year. And I kind of looked at him like, holy shit, okay. We were feeding 3,000 to 4,000 people a day. I had 75 people underneath me just in the kitchen alone.
You're 22 years old.
I'm 22 years old. Literally my first 2-3 weeks of being the chef, I could like feel and see people laughing at me walking in the kitchen.
Really? How'd that make you feel?
It was intimidating for sure. And I got it. So there was a gentleman there who helped actually open that cafe. It was like a real high-end kind of food court. And so if you imagine each station was sort of a representative of a place in the world. Like we had a Pacific Asian station. We had Indian food. We had African food. We had Mediterranean, French, just all different areas of the world. And we did about 52 entrees a day that changed every day.
Damn.
And probably for each entree, each station, there was probably 4 to 6 sides, and those changed daily as well. We bought rice by the pallets. I never knew, God, man, people love rice everywhere, you know? Yeah. And so, his name was Kim San. He was an Asian gentleman, and he really helped me. Kind of said, look, these guys are going to respect you. You just got to work side by side with them. And that's what I did. I got up in their business, asked them lots of questions. I'd have little cutting competitions with them, like, hey, I bet you I can break this case of broccoli down faster than you can, and give out little prizes to people when they beat me. Sometimes I'd beat them, and I was always just being very helpful and really getting to know them as people.
So the big things I'm hearing from you are getting to know them as people, and getting up in their business. Like, is that what you mean by getting up in their business? Like really just like learning about them?
Yeah, just really learning about them. Like, hey, where are you from? There was probably, out of those 75 people, there's probably 26 different countries represented, being that it was the World Bank. And so there was a lot of these people were cousin, aunts, uncles, moms, dads, siblings of people that worked in the World Bank. And so I was just real curious about their cultures. Like, well, what's it like in Thailand? What's it like in Jamaica? What's it like, down in Oaxaca, Mexico? And so I just asked a lot of questions. I've always been that way. I've been super curious. I asked tons of questions. And, so that's really what I mean by getting up in their business. Just really getting to know them as people and what they're about and what makes them tick. And
I love this, man. And if you want people to take an interest in you, the best way to do that is by taking an interest in them.
Exactly.
And that's what, that's the big underlying message there. You also asked them for their opinion on stuff. In doing so, you learned about them, you found out what knowledge they had, and you let them weigh in. What's the power of letting them weigh in?
Well, so, it's funny you mentioned that. So about a month and a half after I was the chef, they came to me and said, hey, Mike, we want you to redo the menu. And I was like, holy shit. Like, what do I know about African food, right? I mean, it was kind of on autopilot at that point. They all knew how to make the dishes, and I just sort of would support them. Yeah. And then, so now I had to go and like basically recreate this menu. There was about 25% I couldn't touch that were sort of like the holy grail items. But I changed about 75% of the menu, and if you can imagine, that's a lot of food to have to come up with.
You had to lean on your team. How else would you have done it? That's a lot to do for one person.
Yeah, and so I would ask them, like, hey man, if I want to make really good pad thai, like, what do you use? Like, I got these cookbooks. I know you're not I know they don't use soy sauce for that. Like, that's more Japanese, or whatever. Whatever the case, like what makes a great, Ethiopian dish. Like, what are the chilies you use? I know it's not cayenne pepper, or maybe you do use it. I don't know. Like, what do y'all use over there? And so really that helped me sort of, lean on them. They felt appreciated in the sense of like, God, this guy really cares about how to make an authentic dish from my country.
Yeah.
And so it got a lot of respect from the employees, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, I love it. And the other thing that I think we have to put a little bit of emphasis on is this idea of friendly competition, right? Gamification.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're doing that. Like you're there shoulder to shoulder trying to, you're setting the pace, but you're not just showing them like, this is how you do it. You're making it fun. What's the secret to that and the impact of that?
So mainly just, making it fun. I always made sure there was music in the kitchen. We'd tell lots of jokes, laugh a lot. I'm like, if you're not, we're here 40, 50, 60, 80 hours a week. Like, let's have fun doing it. It's just, and so some of the games we would do would be that, just a lot of those little contests, and we kind of rib each other and have fun with each other, and it just really kind of creates this camaraderie.
Yeah.
Almost like you're all in a battle. Let's go arm in arm and let's win the battle today.
Yeah. And how do you find the balance of making it friendly and fun? And you said giving each other little jab shots in the ribs, or what? I can't remember exactly what you said. How do you not take it too far? How do you find that balance in a very politically correct and safe world that we have to be in today?
Yeah, I think, some of that self-awareness, right? Like knowing who you are and also knowing who you're dealing with. I think you learn what can be done and what can't be done by knowing your audience, And, it was never like, hey, shorty or anything like that. It wasn't those kind of jabs, more just like, hey, man, that's a little too much salt in that stew, brother. It was those kind of jabs, right? Like just,
Kind-natured.
Yeah, just about what the job was, and so that was the things that we would sort of rib each other on, and the other thing is like I'd make stuff and I'd take it to 10 people and say, hey, what do you think of the soup? What do you think of the sauce? What does it need? And I think that got them comfortable so that when I'd go to them and give them feedback about something they made,
yes,
that it was a give and take.
Yes.
Like, hey, it's okay to tell me this is too spicy or not spicy enough.
You're establishing that culture that this isn't about you, it's about the process.
Exactly.
And it's about what we're trying to do together. And you have to establish that two-way road of communication. You have to let them know that they're able to give you feedback when it's time.
Yeah.
I love it. Did I cut you short?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm loving this conversation. I'm sure we could learn so much more from just this time at what was the World Bank, right?
Yeah.
But you also, I know you went to California. You had some experiences with Disney and was it MTV? Was that the name?
Yeah, so it was MTV Networks,
Okay.
And there was a bunch of other people in that building, and it was sort of their LA headquarters. Did lots of catering back when they were doing music videos a lot back in those days, and we did that. And then we also took over the Disney Animation Studios and did all the food service for that. I helped open Interscope Records. They had a little cafe in there. And I was also a regional chef and did a lot of international cuisine classes when I was out in California. Nice. So, because I gotten a lot of chops from being in D.C., and so they'd bring me in and I'd do classes on like Indian food or, and I found some great vendors that had some bases of things that to where you didn't have to have 18,000 ingredients for one curry dish. Maybe you had, the base of it and you'd add another 6 ingredients and you still get this badass curry or whatever. So, so I'd help train some of those things. I'd help with procurement. I'd help find, sometimes oddball ingredients. I did some menu writing while I was out there. And then just, had to run my units and make sure they were all good.
So was there one big lesson that you can pull from that time of your life when you're in California? Because I know you still, after this, you go to Houston, then that's when you finally, after Houston, Texas, you were at the Chuy's for a while. I want to make sure we leave a little space for that.
Yeah, so I, the big lesson there, I felt like I was felt owning and okay, I'm a chef now.
Okay.
And I started sort of owning that part of myself, and I've got something to offer. And so it was kind of honing some more of my management skills. I had a little more of I was managing managers now. And so I was starting to learn how to do that.
So paint that picture of where your management skills were getting there and where they were when you left. How did you evolve as a manager during that time?
So I was, I had a lot of staff, but they were mostly just hourly staff. And then I worked with folks. I wasn't really in charge of them. So when I got to LA, at first I was just the chef at MTV in that whole building. And then we got the Disney account. Okay. And so I oversaw both of them. So I had people that I had to manage in both places. So learning how to sort of get my vision carried out, but then also work with some as a higher caliber or maybe same caliber as you or even better. And so how to develop them, how to let them succeed. And, I used some of the same principles I did with the hourly staff as far as just, making it fun and stuff. But at the same time, you hear someone who's accomplished, let's let them shine a little bit. And same kind of thing, just what kind of ideas, a lot of back and forth, and really just having this open dialogue environment to let everybody's sort of ideas be heard.
Yeah. So you're applying, but how do you do that in a way when you're applying these skills that you'd use in hourly employees, but now when you're managing managers and people who might be of a higher caliber of you, what things do you need to keep in the back of your mind to not be maybe disrespectful or questioning of their ability? How do you balance that?
So there's a quote out there: "Seek to understand rather than seek to understand."
First seek to understand, then seek to be understood.
Yeah,
I think it's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah. And so really the way you do that is you really understand who and what they're about and what they have and what they're bringing to the table. And then the other thing is having some trust and some faith in individuals, like giving them rope, okay, you think you got, you want to try this, let's try it. Let's see what happens, and sometimes you let them fail. And then a lot of times they really succeed. And so providing that environment for them, I think is hugely helpful. And so I started learning that, basically, giving them the chance to rise up and do what they do, what they're good at.
I love it. So you're still with Marriott when you come out to Houston, right? You never left the company. So you took Brian's advice, man. You were with Marriott for 8 years, and you were jumping around every 2 years.
Yeah. And so at that point, it had switched from Marriott to Sodexo had bought in that portion of the business. That was about right when I got out to LA was when that deal was final. And so some friends from the World Bank called me and said, "Hey, we got this great opportunity. This place in Houston, this place called Enron." We all know how that ended.
Yep.
And I learned a lot of good lessons there. So it was going to be the state-of-the-art cafe with fresh bakery, homemade pasta, a bunch of different stations. Not really international per se, but we were going to have sushi. We're going to have all these different things, all homemade, all done in front of you. Sort of early version of what you see in a food hall in New York now. So it was that sort of ambiance. And got out there. There was an existing building. They had erected the second tower. It was already built. The kitchen was pretty much finished out. And I was working on the menu and hiring everybody, and then the stock market scandal just tanked the company. And I had to lay off 65 people. Damn. For some reason, they decided since I was the new guy and I didn't have history with a lot of them, that was the guy who was going to have to lay everybody off. And that was not fun. I sat at a table somewhat like this, with a line of 10 to 20 people at a time, basically coming to ask me, "Hey, what's my fate with, my career or working with you guys?" And, I think we only found jobs for maybe like 24 people.
Man, that's rough.
Out of 65 or 80 of them.
I mean, is there like a life lesson, an underlying lesson that you took from? You said you learned a lot from this time, but is there one thing that like really like stuck with you?
Well, I think so. What that lesson taught me, and you kind of referred to this earlier, like, you know, I think up until that point, I'd maybe been a little too loosey-goosey with my staff and a little too friendly. Not that you can be too friendly, but I guess, you know, sometimes you forget that like business is business, right? Like there's things that need to happen. Sometimes you can't give a guy all the hours they want.
Yeah.
You can't, you know, you still have to make business decisions that affect people, you know, and those are hard conversations to have. And so it taught me that, you know, this is still a business. It was a hard lesson. That took about 3 days to do that. And each night I came home and I got tears in my eyes because it was awful, you know.
Yeah.
And some of the people we laid off had been with the company for 20 years. But because of their skill set and whatever, they just didn't have a spot for them. Yeah. And I wasn't making that call. I was just the messenger, you know. And so, you know, so I just learned, you know, and I learned a lot more, I think, on a deeper level, having compassion for people as well. So those were the two big takeaways from that. And, you know, hey, business happens.
Yeah.
And it affects people's lives.
And you were still working for Marriott at this point. They were contracting Marriott out, right? So you still had a job. You're still working with Marriott. You're still safe. You weren't getting a paycheck from Enron.
No. So, but that account closed, obviously. And so I did a couple things in Houston for a couple months. And then they found me a position in Austin to be the head chef for Dell.
That's another company you might have heard of, yeah.
Yeah. And
especially this is the early 2000s, right?
Yeah. So there's about, I want to say there's 13 or 14 cafes at Dell at that time. So it's in their heyday, and they also had manufacturing down there. So we did the food service for that, and I think our catering business was something like $5 or $6 million a year. Damn. On top of all the stuff we did in the cafes. Wow. And we do catering, especially at end of quarter stuff. You know, thousands of people. Christmas parties were insane. Oh, man. And it was a busy job. Yeah. And so I ran all the cafes at all the different buildings, and every cafe had a kitchen manager and a manager and maybe an assistant manager depending on the size. And so I was in charge of them, and helped with menu development there. That's one of the reasons they brought me there, because they kind of wanted to get out of the normal corporate dining thing, and that's sort of it sounds like this is when you're making your transition away from the corporate world, because I know you ended up going to Chuy's after that, right? Yeah. And so I just, you know, and at first it was taken well, and then I think the company just, you know, they were trying to, you know, strategically, you know, make the business more profitable and streamline things. And so they were wanting you to run menus that were created in Gaithersburg, Maryland. It's like, dude, people like chicken fried steak. They like barbecue. They don't want your like Italian wedding soup down here. Yeah. You know, I'm sorry. They just don't, you know? Yep. And so I just sort of got kind of tired fighting that battle. And I was actually going to start kind of doing home delivery meals out of my house. And I got a call from a friend, and they were like, hey, you know, I'm good friends with one of the owners at Chuy's, and they really need a chef, and I thought of you. Yeah.
And this is like 2004, right?
Yeah, something like that, 2004.
Just a side note, like the way your mind works, because like that sector is huge right now of home delivery, home cooking, right?
Yeah.
Even before COVID-19. Just to kind of give the listeners an idea of like the way your mind works, like to have, like, what even gave you that idea? I'm curious.
Well, I felt like there was a good opportunity to get like an affordable chef made meal somewhere between the mine was going to be somewhere between $7 and $10.
Yeah.
And, but really good food, healthy, delivered to your doorstep, ready to go, kind of a meal plan situation.
You did all right with Torchy, so it's not like it's
yeah, I did all right with Torchy's. And so anyway, so I went to work with the Chuy's guys. It wasn't really in their Chuy's concept. It was a place called Lucy's Boatyard, which used to be on Lake Austin.
Okay.
Next to the Hula Hut. And
so was that at this point, do you know you want to do your own thing? Are you still trying to figure it out? Were you trying to get away from the corporate world so you can learn more about the independent side of things?
I was definitely having the itch, and I was wanting to scratch it to do my own thing. And I sort of knew in the back of my head that, like, if I was ever going to have a family, if I was going to be a father, like, my big thing was I wanted to own my own time. And so, and it's hard to do that unless you're a business owner. And even then you don't necessarily always own it, but you have a little more control over it. Yeah. And so, and also I wanted to create opportunities for people. Yes. I was getting frustrated with there was these great, capable folks, especially in that Marriott system where I was, and I don't know if it's true on the hotel side, but just in the corporate dining side where I was just watching a lot of people get passed up. Then it's just like they didn't really have any opportunity to sort of grow unless they were willing to move like halfway across the country. Yeah. And so that was another big thing. I said to myself, if I ever start something, I want to do it so I can create opportunities for people.
And like that's what it means. The best brands out there realize that if I don't give this person an opportunity, this all-star I have on my team an opportunity, they're gonna get it someplace else. And it's just about relationships and investing in relationships and giving people opportunity. I mean, there's so much that's just like instinctual in you that comes out early in your story. Not to make too many assumptions, but you know what I mean? Yeah. So you want to give opportunity to people. Did you have the idea for Torchy's at this point? Did you learn anything at Chuy's that you think kind of set you up for being able to do your own thing?
Yeah. So the good thing about that job, and I'm really grateful for the owners, Mike Young and John Zapp, that started Chuy's, great guys. And I got the opportunity to work side by side with, real deal successful restaurant owners. And I got to see how they think and why they made certain decisions about certain things. And, not so much from, what the managers and stuff in the industry, like I was sat with them pretty regularly around just, and also working on this concept. And then also just sort of their whole premise around food and not just accepting, just mediocrity. And, like, well, that sauce is good, but I don't know, could it be better, And so that was real instrumental and just sort of mainly how they just sort of thought about the restaurant business.
How did they think about the restaurant business that impacted you? Was it just a quality over, bottom line?
They were real big on quality. They were real big on people, which was also to me, but I sort of got to see it on more of a macro level, as like from an owner's point of view. And so,
what did that new perspective do for you?
Well, I think it got me ready to be able to open my own thing is what it really did for me.
What specifically?
God, you put me on the
That's
spot.
what I do, man. I pull back the layers. Bastard, man. But like you're saying, like this new perspective allowed you to see the specific things. Specifically, it sounds around culture that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. What were they doing? What perspective did they give you from an independent standpoint in the independent sector that you wouldn't have otherwise had if you didn't give yourself this opportunity?
Yeah, they worked a lot with their people. They cared a lot about their people. And that really spoke to my heart, and when I was in a big sort of corporate environment, you didn't get to see that, you'd see it sort of intermittently.
Too many points removed.
Yeah. And so, and that really sort of gave me the hope of like, you could be a business owner. You don't have to be a prick. Like, you can love your people. You can, love on them. You can develop them. And just, I got to hear stories about, guys that were bussers that, were running their own restaurants now and that were, and so that gave me a lot of inspiration and just sort of how they thought about it. And also that, you know, a lot like me, it wasn't some big business plan they wrote up, you know, they thought a lot from inspiration, like they'd get inspired by something. And rather than have all these rules around it, they would just go out and do it and try it. And that's kind of what they were doing with Lucy's Boatyard. Like they didn't want like a Joe's Crab Shack or somebody to come in. They wanted to keep it local. And so they took the lease and they're like, man, we'll figure it out. Like, you know, and so kind of started with like burgers and fried seafood. And, you know, it was such a hard place to run, man. It was 500 seats, 3 different levels. It had been a bunch of different places.
But your servers were in shape.
Yeah, they were, man. They were. You know, I think on a busy shift, we'd have something like 25 servers, you know, when we were really cranking.
I'm guessing the other thing this probably did for you, I don't know what the world of working for like companies like, you know, Dell and Enron at the time when they were doing good, Disney, I mean, these are some really well-known brands. They probably had decent budgets. When you're going from that corporate setting with deep pockets, and I'm making assumptions here, and then going to the world of independent operators where you really have smaller margins, you really got to pay attention to that bottom line.
Yeah.
Did that weigh in at all? I'm curious.
Yeah, it did, for sure. Just, you know, in terms of how we thought about spending money, you know, and it's funny because, you know, on one hand, they wouldn't want to spend money on certain things, but the things that counted, they had no problem spending money on. And so I sort of learned kind of
what were the things that counted?
You know, like equipment, things that were going to make the job better.
Why do those things count?
Or produce a better product? You know, depending on the equipment and what it is, you know, like if you're going to do pizzas, for instance, so they, you know, one of the owners hired this famous pizza chef from Florence, Italy, and he flew down. His name was Massimo, and we had pretty badass pizzas there, you know, and he helped us develop the pizza dough. And
I think the point, and I think it's the message is here, but you got to give your people the tools they need to be successful.
Exactly.
And if the tools aren't working, then you can't hold them accountable.
Yeah.
So you got to spend the money on those things.
And if you're going to make great Italian pizza, you better have a damn good oven to cook it in.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just, you know, bust out some ghetto pizza oven.
How do we start this conversation? Details, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love it. You have your own vision. Take us through that vision. What was your vision for Torchy's?
Okay, so it wasn't this huge vision. It was, you know, I was finally sort of like, okay, I was tired. I'd been working just tons of hours. And I was like, man, I need a break. I'm ready to do something different, you know, and I don't know what it is. I knew I wanted to do my own thing, and I just sort of needed to gather my thoughts. And as I was ready to take this nice break, my friend Bill, who was my original partner, had an old barbecue trailer that ended up being the original Torchy's trailer. He said, hey, man, what do you think about opening a taco truck? And I looked at him. I said, dude, you're nuts. Like, what are you talking about? We're not going to open a taco truck in Austin,
You mean
Texas.
to tell me I should be sitting across from Bill right now?
Yeah. And so now Bill was very instrumental in helping Torchy's be what it is today, especially in those beginning days. He's a good friend of mine. And so we started to talk about it, and, you know, I realized, and so I said, well, let's go eat a bunch of tacos and let's kind of see what's out there, you know. And what I started seeing was there's a lot of great tacos out there, and I all over Austin, went to Dallas, Houston, down into the Valley, down into San Antonio, and just realized, like, they're all kind of the same, you know. They're all sort of like authentic, kind of Mexican street style tacos. Nothing wrong with them. They're great. They do what they do. But I thought, like, well, what if we could take tacos and kind of flip them on their head? And I've got this plethora of experience with all these different ingredients. I know the basics of, you know, Central American cuisine, Mexican cuisine.
You're Asian.
And how do you take that and still, you know, honor that, but then like have fun with it, you know? And so that was sort of where Torchy's was born out of, sort of that creativity. And
I mean, from like a business perspective, you have a unique selling proposition. You're not like every other taco out there. Like you're taking the traditional taco, and it's like kind of like when fusion was really starting to emerge, right? This idea of like, who says you can't do this, right?
Yeah.
And just do it. And like the sky's the limit. Creativity is the limit. And how did so instantly, what did that do for you? Having something that was unlike anything else.
Well, I think what it did was it helped because, look, if you have let's call it a barbacoa taco, and you're going to eat that barbacoa taco, well, you're going to compare that to the barbacoa taco you had on the street in Mexico City the first time you ever had it.
It's never going to be as good.
And it's never going to be as good, And so you're fighting that battle. The other battle you're fighting is, there's a lot of competition in that same sort of realm. You're competing against 30 other great barbacoa tacos. And two, it's just never been my style to sort of stick to that. Like I'm always sort of like, okay, this is sort of the traditional way you do it, but how can you put a twist on it?
Yeah, make it your own.
Yeah, make it your own. And I think a lot of chefs try to do that, especially nowadays. And so it was really about just having fun and doing something different and using the tortilla as the base. Yeah,
and like that's the beautiful thing about creating something that has never been done before. You're instantly the best at it because you become the new standard, right?
Yeah, and you can't and that's sort of why we've got some of the names for the tacos. It's like rather than call it the fried chicken taco, which is kind of boring, but you haven't had a trailer park anywhere else, so you got nowhere to compare it to. Mm-hmm. And so you get to have this fresh experience of like what a Torchy's trailer park is like, and you'll either love it or you won't.
So this was all before food trucks were a big thing. I think it's a really important thing to point out, right? This is like food trucks weren't a thing like they are today.
No, not even close. Yeah. So we started August 1st, 2006, and around that same sort of couple months, there was us, Flip Happy Crepes, who used to be in business in Austin, and then Hey Cupcake. We were all kind of starting, and we all had trailers, and none of us knew each other or knew that we were doing it at the same time, but we'd run into each other. And it just sort of emerged, and I think we were all just sort of young entrepreneurs, and that was the only way we could afford to do it. And so we were like, screw it, let's do it. And so, we'd gone to banks. Nobody was going to give us $500,000 to open some new concept that didn't have any proven concept. And so the trailer was kind of a way to do that. And it turned into this kind of cool, hip thing. And in the beginning, man, people, they didn't want to come eat out of a trailer, because it was, oh, that's a roach coach, or that's this, you know. And so, but I've always run it like a restaurant. And, even in just the trailer, like if I said I was open at 7, I opened at 7. Yep. If we said we were staying open till 10, we stayed open till 10.
How are you pushing it? How are you marketing yourself in the early days?
So early on, I used to have a red Vespa, and I put a big old basket on the back of it, and I'd hand out free chips and salsa, and I'd put them in anybody's mouth. I could go into salons, barbershops. Yeah, yes. Man, I'd go into, little architect firms and lawyer firms and, anywhere I could go, and would just shove food in their mouth. And I used to get some of the servers from the boatyard. They'd come help me out because initially we were right on 5th and Lamar before we moved to South First. Okay. And we were only there for about a month and a half. And we'd hand out free breakfast tacos with all the traffic stopped there.
So what's the power in free food and handing stuff out in the early days?
Well, I'm a big believer if you can get it in their mouths and they like it, hopefully they'll come back. Yeah. And, and so I gave lots of food away, I mean, I think sort of the traditional, not so much these days, but, definitely back then, the advertising and putting an ad in the paper and all that, the newspapers will hate me for this, but, I think that works for when you're more established and you're trying to get people like, oh yeah, I mean, I haven't had a burger at that place.
At that point, you're just a reminder. You're like, oh yeah, it's been a while since I've been to Torchy's. But
yeah.
But until you got to build trust with the brand first. Right?
Yeah. And so in order to do that is like really getting the food in people's mouths, you know, and we still do that today. Anytime we open a place, we give away free food at our grand opening parties, and we invite the neighborhood and have them come in and try it, and it's free, and hopefully they love it and they come back.
So, I mean, I'm kind of assuming for the money to get started with this, what was the initial investment you needed for the trailer?
I want to say I spent somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000.
Okay, and was Bill a part of this initial? Was he thrown into like? What
yeah,
was that
he put in up his share of the $60,000 or so bucks too.
Okay,
and.
So about 120 altogether, 130
Yeah,
altogether?
somewhere in there. Yeah.
So I think another benefit, the path you took, there's a lot of security in the corporate world. I'm assuming you were probably
all my
making
friends
more.
thought I was nuts.
Yeah, but at the same time, you probably had insurance. You were probably putting money away. You probably had money did you have to go to banks to get the money, or were you saving up?
I mean, I hadn't made tons of money, in the corporate dining world. They didn't pay chefs that great.
Okay.
Even though I had some great, you'd think high profile jobs, but I was still young. I mean, I started Torchy's at 32.
That's a good point.
And I just think, there was some kind of, hey, this guy's young, we could pay him less, even though I'd try to argue for more salary, wasn't always in my favor per se, but I took a loan out of my house, maxed out a bunch of credit cards.
You gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Just figured it out, man.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to go from the trailer to your first brick and mortar?
So our first brick and mortar was in 2008, so it took about 2 years.
Okay.
We had a commissary kitchen, which is where Holy Cow Burgers is now.
Okay.
In a little convenience store over off Lamar. We sold tacos out of there, but it wasn't like a real brick and mortar for us.
Was it always your objective to open a brick and mortar? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
It always was. So I always the goal was always to go from a trailer to a restaurant. Now, 75 restaurants? No, but definitely at least one restaurant.
Yeah. So what would you advise somebody to take the path that you took today with the world, how it's changed, the landscape with how it's changed? Do you think that there's the same opportunity in trailers now that there was back then? Is it still the same move?
I don't know. I think trailer, no trailer. I mean, I think it's hard to run a trailer. There's you've got weather to deal with, heat. You've got rain when it's really cold.
You're at the mercy.
Yeah, you're at the mercy of that. So that makes it really difficult. And there's a lot of it's not as cheap running day-to-day operations as you would think. Maybe there's a little less staff.
Mm-hmm.
But,
maintenance.
Propane's expensive, maintenance. I mean, if you have any kind of business, you beat the hell out of those trailers.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot, and then you have the expense of the commissary, and then you have to transport that food to it, and, or drive it back and forth. And so there's a lot involved.
Yeah.
And my main thing is more about, hey, find something you're passionate about. If you really want to start a business, don't do it for the money. Do it because you're passionate about it. And, maybe the money will come, maybe it won't. But if you're doing something you love, then you don't really need the money to keep doing it because it's something you love doing.
I love it. So what was that transition like going from were you still operating the trailers while doing the brick and mortar?
Yep. In the beginning we were, yeah.
Okay. So what was that transition like?
It felt a lot more roomy.
I bet.
I was like, oh man, I can breathe again. We have a bathroom indoors we can use. That was nice. It was, we had to start, now we had to start really like hiring some managers and stuff. And so that was tough. Even though I'd done it in my past, this was my baby. I was like, oh man, I got to trust these people that they're really going to, make these tacos good while I'm not here.
And this is before you had your Torchy's core values, right? I mean, you had your core values, but you hadn't committed them to paper yet.
Yeah. I mean, we sort of toyed with them here and there, but it wasn't like a whole thing yet. It was sort of just kind of underground. They were sort of floating, but we hadn't really named them yet. And so, it was, to get somebody at that time, like, hey, dude, we're going to hire you as a manager of a trailer. They're kind of like, really? Yeah. Okay. All right. So it was hard to find good qualified folks. And so we did a lot of developing within. I took a lot of my cooks and cashiers and, promoted them and worked with them and trained them.
How much experience did they have?
A lot of them, not much. So, some of them, it was their first job. Some of them had been in some rough spots in their life, and we were kind of giving them their second chance. And they were rising to the occasion and doing better for themselves. And so, and some I had some experience. It kind of ran the gamut, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So, reflecting over this 14 years, right? I just want to focus on the biggest lessons you've learned, like maybe the hardest points in your career when you were scaling, that were the biggest challenges for you. What were those?
The funny thing is, because we've been so sort of like scrappy from the beginning, we've definitely had our share of some financial challenges throughout the years, getting over our skis a little bit.
At what point did you get over your skis?
Well, we were over our skis the first 3-4 years in business, to be honest with you. I didn't even know where the skis were at that point. We were just doing everything we could just to keep the lights on and people paid and everything else. And, I think those first couple times we sort of got a little more intentional with growing.
Mm-hmm.
We bit off maybe a little more than we could chew. But we always something would happen. And, I learned, the other thing I learned real early on with Torchy's was that this was bigger than me, was just sort of how our customers reacted to the brand. They really responded to the brand, the logo, the food. And I just knew that it was, it was bigger than me. And I've always had this sort of kind of faith that like things are just going to work out.
Yeah.
And, do I get in fear about stuff? Of course. Do I worry sometimes? Of course. But kind of underneath all that, there's still a part of me that like, hey, this brand really comes from an inspired place, and I think it's meant to be out there in the world, and it needs to be out there for whatever reason. I think that changes on a daily basis. I get stories since we've been in business of people getting engaged. Just some of the things we've been able to help and do in the community have been just amazing. Some of the experiences we've had from customers.
So the question that's coming to my mind right now is, what is the secret to creating a brand that's bigger than yourself? Because something that you mentioned too is that you didn't want the brand to depend on you. You wanted to be able to control your time. So how do you create something that doesn't that doesn't hinge on a single person that's greater than one person?
Well, I go back to what we said earlier in terms of, hiring people that are better than you. Finding people that are great at, if I suck at finances, which I'm not that good at, I understand them. I can read them, all that, but I don't have the patience for it. Find someone who's really good at finances.
Yep.
If I don't know construction, like go find someone that's great at construction. If I'm not that good at marketing, find someone that's good at marketing, or HR or whatever it is, find the people that are great at that, let them succeed, let them own their part of the business, and trust them, and have real open dialogue with them.
I love it. I don't care if we talk about COVID. Do you?
No, we're good.
Okay.
I think people have heard enough about it.
So one question before we go to the speed round is the mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. How have you transformed over the past however many years you've been in this industry?
I've learned how to be much more patient. I think I've matured a lot in a lot of ways. I used to be pretty reactive. I sort of came from, that chef world of, yelling and screaming. I got brought up with a decent amount of that early on before I was a chef. I vowed that I didn't want to be that chef. But there were times where I lost my temper, wasn't proud of those moments, and had to learn through that. And I've also, I think I've really developed my people skills with people. I've always been a pretty aware person of other people's personalities. But I feel like that's just gotten better over time just because of the amount of people you have to deal with in this business. And, I'd say those are some of the bigger things that I've definitely taken away from it.
We're back, and the first question I have for you is, what is your it factor, a habit, a trait, a characteristic you believe most contributes to your success?
My it factor, tenacity.
What's your biggest weakness?
Biggest weakness, impatience.
What's one question you ask or thing you look for when you're building a team?
I ask or look for when I'm building a team.
In a person.
This is more of a sentence. So we have this thing. It's like if I can drive to El Paso and back with them and not want to throw them out of the car, they're probably somebody I want to work with on a daily basis.
I think that's how I became a commercial pilot. What's one of your biggest challenges today?
Biggest challenges, just maintaining the integrity of the brand as it started.
And how are you overcoming that?
Focusing a lot on culture and food quality.
What is one code of conduct or behavior you teach your team? This is a core value, a way to be.
It's part of our core values. We talked about them earlier: respect, honor, having integrity.
What's one uncommon standard of service you teach your team? So this is something that's common within the four walls of your restaurants, but not common throughout the industry, to go above and beyond.
I don't know if it's uncommon or not, but we preach it a lot, is basically treating our customers like family.
What is one book that's a must read to make us a better person or restaurant owner or operator?
1 Minute Manager is a great book.
Biggest lesson from that book?
It talks a lot about, just different teams and sort of the process and what they go through. And that helped kind of normalize a lot of, we've hired tons of people. And so it helped normalize sort of the struggles we go through with that.
And what is one thing you feel restaurateurs don't do well enough or often enough?
I think the focus on the food.
They focus too much on the food, or they don't focus enough on the food?
They don't focus enough on the food.
Okay. All right. And specifically the quality or the integrity? All of that? All
and I don't, I'm not saying that like us versus them necessarily, but, why, people are coming there to eat. Yeah. So the food better be damn good, and we focus a lot on the food.
So what is one service you've hired or outsourced to? This isn't necessarily a technology or a tool, but a person and skill sets from maybe it's a organization that you've outsourced to, like marketing or whatever.
We definitely have used some PR firms and some legal firms to help us with some stuff.
Can you mention them by name so we can get a referral?
Oh, God, who have we used? T3 we've used for doing a lot of marketing stuff. Edible.
And what about for lawyers?
God, I don't remember the names. You put me on the spot.
I know, that's what I do, man. I'm sorry. You're doing great. You're doing great. What is one thing you feel, what is one piece of technology you've outsourced to recently that's had a huge impact on your operation?
Oh, God, you're really throwing me off the books here.
This is why you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yes, yes. Well, we hired a chief technology officer, and she's brought a lot of resources to the table. So, and I'm not sure of everything she's using, but she's definitely bringing a lot of resources to the table. You
got somebody for that. I totally get it. Okay, so this is the last question, and it's a doozy. So get ready for it.
All right.
If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and for your legacy. What would those things be?
3 pieces of wisdom?
Yeah.
I don't know. Treat people with respect. Be the best you can be. And, I think, follow your dreams and your passion.
I love it, man. This has been a great conversation, Mike. Thank you so much. We wrap up every chat by calling somebody out. I believe you've been recommended at least 3 or 4 times on the show. That's why we're here talking to you.
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
happy we made it happen. And who do you respect and admire and believe will make a great guest mentor like you made for us today?
I think you guys should talk to old Tyson Cole over at Chuy.
Yes.
He's I just really respect what he does. One of my favorite restaurants that I go to, does a great job with the food. He's got a great culture in his organization.
The amount of people that I've interviewed who came up underneath that restaurant, that group, is a testament to the greatness that's going on over there.
Exactly.
Sure.
He's definitely somebody you guys need to talk to.
And if we're interested in maybe coming and joining your team, or we have questions about anything, what's the best way to connect? If you're in social or anything like that, or if maybe we're just interested in joining your team, is there a website?
Yeah, just torchystacos.com. We have, obviously a lot of job opportunities on there. Into the restaurants, if it's more of a restaurant level, job. But I'd say torchy's.com or through our social channels would be great.
Beautiful. Awesome. This is episode 729. Head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/729 for a summary of today's discussion, as well as any books, tools, or services recommended. It'll be linked to over there. Mike, again, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your knowledge, and your mentorship. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Cheers.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed today's video, please like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. And don't forget, there's a complete archive of every episode at restaurantunstoppable.com. Peace.